Hi, Phil here. I want to talk a little bit about how I restore, or at least refresh, a typical featherweight case. This particular case is from 1948. It's a so-called Type 2 case. This is the machine it goes to. It's a customer's machine. This one's actually in quite good condition. It's not going to take a lot to get this one looking real nice again. The biggest problem it's got is the handle is coming apart here. But luckily, the Featherweight shop sells a leather-wrapped handle that's a very close replacement for that, so I'll be able to replace that handle. But let's take a close look at this thing, and I'll describe, and then I'm going to show you how I clean it up and refresh the finish on it. So let's take a closer look at this case. Again, this is a Type 2 case. The hardware is in working condition on it. We open it up, it has the typical lift-out tray that you often, well, that's standard with the Type 2. The tray is in good shape. It's dirty. We're going to clean that. It's got a couple of problems with the fabric. The fabric's been abraded here. I'm going to show you how I'll repair that, and there's a spot on the bottom. But overall, the tray's in very good condition. The case itself, again, the hardware is in good shape. We're going to take this handle off by pulling these pins out. The handle from the Featherweight shop, and here it is. It's leather wrapped and stitched across the top, very similar to the original. And they provide new pins, and we have to take out these two pins. So that's actually the first thing I'm going to do once I explain this to you, is I'm going to take the old handle out by taking these pins out. And then we're going to clean up the hardware, the latches and these posts where the handle mounts and also the hinges on the back before we work on the fabric. That way, as we're cleaning the fabric, we aren't going to risk getting it dirty again with the rotary tool and the little bits of metal that come flying off when we clean up the hardware. But let's look at this overall. Often the corners take a beating and are worn through. And this one, all of the corners look surprisingly good. There's a spot up in here where the fabric is worn, but I'm going to show you how we'll deal with that. On the bottom, this one's in really good shape. Most often the bottom is a bit rough, and these feet that it sits on are often rusty. Very often people have stored machines like in a damp basement, which is the worst place to store a sewing machine. Please don't do that. But I see that quite frequently, that the bottom is evidence of a damp storage location. So this one's going to be very easy to get in nice shape. When we look inside, the fabric in the lid looks great. This fabric that covers the gap from the hinge is often torn. Sometimes if it's not repairable, if it's repairable, I'll glue it back in place as best I can. If it's not repairable, I take a razor blade and remove it, because it looks better that way than to have a kind of a torn and an incomplete one there. On the inside, we see the typical spots like in the corner here where the fabric is loose. And it's actually worse in this corner where the fabric is coming undone. And we're going to repair that. The other corners are similar. The bottom, the camera probably is not showing well in there, but the bottom inside is in quite good shape. So overall, not going to be a heavy lift to fix this one. So let's go ahead and take this handle off and clean up the hardware, and then we'll move on to how we deal with the fabric. All right, so we've moved over to the workbench here. First thing I'm going to do is take this handle off, and we're going to get these pins out, but it's a lot easier to take the pins out with the handle out of the way. So I'm going to take these cutters here and snip through the piece of metal that's holding the handle on. I'll do that on both sides. Okay. And now we can throw that handle away. Now we can see the two pins here, and they are driven in from the outside in. They do not go all the way through. So the way I do that is with a pair of vice grips. I'm going to put a pair of vice grips on there and get those fairly tight. And then I'm going to take a dead blow hammer, and you can see that has allowed us to take that pin we can probably now pull that all the way out. Okay, so there is the first pin removed, and that post needs to be straightened up a little bit. There we go. Okay, let's do the same thing with the other pin. Okay, and we can now take this pin out. You can hear a clock behind me. That's a customer's clock I've just repaired for him. I'm just testing it out here. So now we've got the pins out. I'm going to show you now. The next step is going to be to clean up the hardware. And let me just put a few things away. Put the vice grips away. And put these pliers away. And now we go with the trusty rotary tool. And all I do is just kind of go over the metal and shine it up. And I'm being careful not to really touch the fabric any more than I have to, but just kind of give that a little bit of shine. And the rivets in particular often don't look that good, so we're just gonna. So that's the process. I need to do that over all of these things, the hinges and the posts on the base and the feet on the bottom. So it's rather tedious for you to watch all that. So I will take care of that off camera and then we'll come back. Okay, I'm over at the sink. I've got a pan with some hot water with Dawn dish soap and a sponge. I'm going to start with the tray. Really all I do is I just bring out most of the water and just give this a good scrub. And especially if you see stains or spots that, like in the bottom of this tray, I can see there's some marks in here. I'm going to see if they'll come out with the soapy water. Very often they do. Just a good cleaning makes a big difference in how good these cases look. So you don't want to skip on that step. It seems so basic, but a lot of the problems you address with cleaning. And so that's what we do. There's sometimes the metal part of this. This is the tray is. This is actually a wooden frame, and then it's covered with fabric. And there's a metal piece here and a metal piece here. Sometimes the metal pieces need to be repainted. They've been scraped up, and sometimes there's rust on them. This one won't need any, just cleaning. And there'll only be very, very minor repairs on this tray. So I'm very happy with the condition of this tray. But let's get it cleaned up and see. We'll really be able to assess overall condition once it's really clean. And that stuff in the bottom, what doesn't come out with the soapy water comes out with the fingernail. So just now that it's, yeah, there we go. So just a little soapy water and scraping with the edge of my fingernail, I was able to get, there was kind of a red and a green stain. I don't know if it was wax or who knows. But that all came out. So now let's wash the bottom of this. All right, our tray is in very nice shape and looks a lot better just being clean. So we'll set that aside and work on the case. I always start on the inside in the deepest part and work my way out. There's a couple of white spots in the bottom. Again, I'm using the get them damp with the soap and then try the fingernail, and sure enough, those are coming out. So great. So that's I've seen several times. I've seen on these cases where on the particularly the top of the lid, there's little speckles of paint, and I can tell you what that's from. It's somebody painted a room or painted the closet that the that the thing was stored in and didn't move the machine. So when you're using a paint roller, little tiny droplets of paint come flying off the roller, and they land on things that are within range. So if you're going to paint that closet that you got the featherweight in, good grief, move the featherweight. It's discouraging to have paint that you got to pick off on these things. And there's really no good way to get the paint off other than to pick at each little one, each little spot. And I have done that to get a case clean. All right, so this is again, this case is in quite good shape. You'd be amazed at how dirty my water's getting just from the accumulation in this case. The other thing that we need to deal with is, particularly if the machine has been stored in a damp location, is the cases sometimes smell musty, and that is, you'd think that that's the end of the world, but there's actually a good solution for that too. I won't have to do that. This case has no musty smell, but probably a third of the cases that I see, I need to treat for that. And there's a product that the Featherweight shop sells. It's you spray into the case and leave it closed overnight, and it works amazingly well. But even before I do that, you always want to start by cleaning, because the musty smell is from mildew and mold and dirt and dampness, and a thorough cleaning goes a very long way to getting rid of the smell. So it's only after we've done as much as we can with the cleaning and disinfecting that we go to the product that gets rid of the smell. It's not cheap, but you only need a few spritzes. So a single can of this stuff, and I'll show it to you a little bit later, goes a very long way, and it works. I've had some musty cases that once I've treated with that, there's another spot on there. Yep. Get that out, and we'll just work our way around. So let me finish this up, and then it's going to have to dry for an hour or so, and then we can deal with the loose fabric, and I'll show you exactly what we do with the loose fabric. So the next thing we're going to do, now that the case is clean, is we're going to fix the loose fabric. And the tools we need are yellow wood glue, and this is the type of glue it is actually aliphatic resin. There's lots of different brands. There's Elmer's Carpenter's wood glue, there's Tight Bond, there's Gorilla's got one as well, so it doesn't really matter. They're all basically the same thing. They're aliphatic resin. You can also use white glue like Elmer's. That's a polyvinyl acetate, a PVA glue. That works as well, but I like the yellow glue. It dries a little faster, and it's got good strength. So that's what we're going to use. I just have it in a little glue bottle. We're only going to use very small quantities. The other tool I like, of course, you need an X-Acto knife for trimming the fibers. Put a fresh blade in it. And one of these little rollers, this is a roller that you can get at a paint and wallpaper store. It's used to roll the seams between strips of wallpaper to get them nice and tight and flat. And it's great for when you have some loose fabric, you get the glue under it and you roll over it with this, and that flattens it out nicely. What I don't show here is a sponge and a pan of water. You use a lot of water as well. I mentioned earlier the product that deodorizes the case. This is it. It's a very small spritz bottle. There's only whatever it is. I don't know. It doesn't say. It's probably an ounce or two of product in here. I thought it was more expensive than it is. It's $6.95 for this, which is not bad. It's well worth it. And a little bit goes a long way. You only do 2 or 3 spritz in a case. So I've still got, it looks like about a third of the product left here, and I've probably already deodorized 3 or 4 cases with this bottle already. So there's a couple more for sure before I run out on a $6.95 bottle. So recommend that. So all I'm going to do is get a little bit of glue on there, and I just use my finger. You just spread it around in there, and then take the fibers and kind of line them up the way they're supposed to go. So you can kind of tell which fibers were going in which direction, and just lay them down in the glue. And then I got to go get a sponge here. I didn't put one handy. So anywhere where there's loose fibers, even at the corners and at the edges, just get a little glue on there, work it in, smooth it out, and get the excess off. And in about, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes, that'll be essentially dry. You're not using much glue, and it really bonds the fibers down tight. Now, I don't need to use the roller here, although it wouldn't hurt to go over it just to make sure everything's flat. That way we know we have nothing sticking up when we go over it with the roller. All right, I'm going to do the same thing here. We're actually going to touch up these bare spots to make sure that we don't have bare wood showing, and we're going to touch them up with a matte black paint using an artist brush. But the first thing I do is I get some glue in there, because the bare wood will soak up the paint, and we're trying to fill it. So I'm putting a little dab of glue in there, and I'm letting it crown up a little bit above the surface of the fiber. As the glue dries, it'll shrink. So the idea is to create a kind of fill in that little divot where the fabric is missing. And that's the only spot. We're going to go back on this one here. I'm going to go back and apply a little more glue to build that up. But that's what we do. And if we've put the glue too high, I can lightly sand it. We're going to go very easy with the sanding because we don't want to sand the fabric, but we can knock the high points off. And that's really what it takes. We're going to go around everywhere where there's loose fabric and glue it up like that. But I want to show you what I do. Like on this corner right here, the fabric is a little bit loose. There's some frayed ends. This is very typical. You often see that on the edges where the fabric has been trimmed off, the edges get frayed, and you just run a bead of glue along there. I've already done that on this edge, but I want to show you how I deal with this corner. So I'm just going to put a little bit of glue on there and take my finger and smooth that out, and I'm running the fibers in the direction they want to go, and just basically covering that corner. And then this time I remembered to have a sponge handy, so I'll mop up the excess, and we'll just let that dry. Take a few minutes, and that'll be ready to go. The other thing we need to do is there's places where the fabric isn't frayed, but the coating that's on the fabric has worn through. So I'm going to build that back up with a little bit of glue just to seal that up. And so again, it's just, a lot of this is just to kind of go over the case thoroughly and fill any of the loose areas, the little nicked areas. Just a tiny bit of glue will seal that up, because the last step we're going to do will involve putting another coat of clear finish, very thin coat. I use a product called tung oil, and I'll be explaining that in the next step here. But let's get the edges finished up, and then we'll go on to the last step. Okay, now that the glue work is done, the next step is going to be to take some, I use this satin black enamel and an artist brush, and I'm going to touch up the spots. But before we do that, I need to take, this is a fine grit, one of those sanding sponges. I buy them in a multi-pack. This one's 220 grit. It's quite fine. And anywhere where I had applied the glue, like that's that spot on the bottom, I'm just going to go over that. And you can go back with your finger and feel it. You want to get all the little high spots off so that it's not going to be that noticeable. And then we're going to touch it up. Okay, that's pretty good. And then anywhere else I applied glue, like along here, I'm going to give that a little sand. Just let your fingers guide you here, and any place that feels a little rough, we're going to just go ahead and touch that with the sandpaper. And once that's done, there were a few spots in here that I had put a little finger load of glue on, and that's ready to go. So now let's take, I'm going to get a rag here, and just wipe the sanding dust off. Okay. And let's open up our little can of paint here. And we're going to go ahead. You'll notice I write the month and year of every can of product that I open, so I know when once it's been opened is when it starts to go. So it's just one of the ways I stay organized. I keep track of when I open things. So you don't need much of this paint. We're really just touching it up very, very lightly. Wherever there's, like right here, I'm just going to fill that in ever so lightly. And try to keep the paint just confined to the area where the repair was, just so it's not so noticeable when we put our final coat of sealer over the whole thing, which is going to be the last step. And so that's the process. I'm going to go around and touch up, and you can really, any place where there's an abrasion, where the finished surface on the case has worn down to the fabric, you're going to want to touch that up with glue and then a dab of paint, because if you don't, when you put the tung oil coat on at the very end, which is what's going to make it have a nice even sheen, any place where the fabric is still bare or raw, as I like to call it, is going to end up with a different sheen, and it doesn't look very good. It's noticeable. So go along carefully. Edges like this, I can see the fabric starting to poke through at the edge. So I'm just taking the edge of the brush and just touching that up just slightly, just so I get that nice even sheen at the end. Okay? And I'm going to go ahead and finish the rest of this off camera. And when we come back after this is dry, it'll be time to put our coat of tung oil on there. And that's where all your work up to this point will pay off at that point, because it's really going to look great. And, you know, you'll see videos on YouTube of people using things like shoe polish or going over the whole case with a Sharpie. And I don't think those yield a long-lasting result. Shoe polish is mostly wax, and so it's not going to last. And Sharpie, I don't know. I don't think it's an even sheen. It's got a kind of a bluish tint to the black color. It doesn't look, to me, it doesn't look ideal. So I'm going to go ahead and just finish up with the paint. I'm going to set that down, and I'm going to go around and touch up the spots on this larger part of the case as well. And we'll be back here in a little bit and do the final step. All right, so the paint is now dry. The last thing we want to do before we put, and this is the product we're going to wipe on a very, very thin coat of. It's this product called tung oil, which I think works great. But before we rub on the tung oil, any place where there's paint on here, I'm going to take, this is that 220 grit sanding sponge. I'm just going to go over the whole thing just super lightly, just knock off any high spots. And in particular, anywhere where I painted, like this corner right here has paint on it. I'm just going over that just so slightly, just to take the sheen out of the paint. Even though that's a satin finish, I'm just knocking it back so it's kind of dull. And I'm going to do that everywhere where I see any paint from my last step. And just even that up. This way we'll get a nice even finish in the tung oil. So we're going to just go over this whole thing and make sure everything's smooth and any of the glossy spots have been dulled. And I'm going to do that inside and out. I've already done the tray off camera. And there's a few spots inside we're going to do. And up here around the edge. I think that's ready to go. So Yeah, looks good. All right, so before I apply the tongue oil, you'll see I put a nice clean apron on, and I'm going to put on a pair of rubber gloves because this is a wipe-on finish, and you're going to be using your hands, so you definitely need gloves for this. All right, and we're done with the sanding sponge. I'm going to throw that away. I'm just using an old sock to apply it. So what I do is I just kind of fold this into quarters, make kind of a thick cotton wad here, and I spread a little into the fabric of the cotton. And do that a couple times. It'll soak it up quite a bit. So what you end up with is a kind of a saturated sponge of the tongue oil. And let's just show you, I'm just wiping it on here, and we don't need very much. And we don't have to worry about the metal or anything else. We just go over everything. And just wipe it on. And we'll do the inside of this thing everywhere. And this is applying just the thinnest coat of finish. That's why, you know, I buy this in a quart. That might last me a year or more of just doing lots of items. I use this on antique furniture a lot too, as a final coat, because it just works great. It's kind of I use it for more finish restoring. You can kind of revive an old finish pretty well with tongue oil. So that's another good use. All right, so I'm just wiping that down. You can take the part of the wad that doesn't have as much tongue oil in it and wipe off any excess. You don't want much on here. We're just getting the smallest amount. And it'll look a little shiny now. It'll be a little less shiny when it's dry. But wipe off any excess. So you really, it's just like applying just a hint of finish. There's just so little of this that's actually going to stay on the fabric. But that's what we're going to do here. And this will actually, it dries pretty hard, but again, so thin that it will keep the outside of the case with a nice sheen for a very long period. It's very long lasting. So it's not like, and there you can see how nice that looks. That's even. It's kind of a satin finish, and all the bare spots that we touched up, you know, now look good. So I'm going to set that aside, and we'll go over here now and work on this part. So I'm going to continue this off camera. I'll get this all wiped down, and we'll set it aside to dry. When that's dry, we're nearly done. We still have a new handle to put on. And the last little detail, which is often overlooked, is I'm going to save for last as a little kind of a special bonus treat here. It's something I do on every one of these cases, and something that Singer actually did at the factory that you rarely see anymore, but it's a nice way to protect the bottom of your featherweight. So that's be coming up. All right, so we've got this case ready to put the handle back on. Our coat of tongue oil is dry, and I think if you look at that now, you can see there's a bit of a sheen now. It's not high gloss. I think this is probably very close to what it looked like when it was brand new, but it looks nice and even. What I didn't mention when I was applying tongue oil is I go over everything. I go right over the hardware. It's such a thin coat you're putting on that it's really not any kind of a finish that's going to flake off or peel off the hardware. So I think it just looks great to just go over the whole thing. Inside, you know, the whole case just really looks fantastic now. Here's that tray. Again, you know, look at that. That's spectacular. All right, so we have to put the handle back on. I've got the handle, replacement handle from the Featherweight shop. It's leather wrapped. And we've got these two pins. And the way the handle goes on here is the pins go through, and the pins, let me just show you here. On the end of the pin is some, I don't know what you call it, knurling, I guess might be the term, on the end of the pin that'll give it some friction, so that last little bit, it will be very tight. I'm going to use adjustable channel lock pliers, and because these have serrated jaws and I don't want to damage the finish on the posts here, I'm putting a scrap of leather around that, and I'll squeeze this to pull that pin all the way home. Let's go a little bit further. Okay, that's one side. Let's turn it around and do the other. All right, handle is on, looking very sharp. There is one last detail that I mentioned, and it is in the bottom of the case from the factory. Singer put in a piece of heavy-duty cardboard. This is actually an original from the factory from Singer. You can see the markings from the bottom of a featherweight that have happened from years of use. This one's gotten too compressed, and it's got a little bit of oiliness to it. So I'm not reusing this one, but it's perfect to have to know exactly what the originals look like. I now know the dimensions. The cutout for the where the bed cushions are is 1 1/4 inches this way and 1 inch this way. So you simply cut the piece of cardboard into a rectangle to fit in the bottom of the case. There's a wooden block in the bottom of the case that stops the featherweight from going too far to the left. And so this piece of cardboard goes from that wooden block to the end, so it doesn't actually cover the entire bottom of the case. So here's my replacement that I've already cut out. You need to use double thickness cardboard. Single thickness cardboard is not adequate. So what I am in the habit of doing is, we get a lot of things shipped to the house nowadays. I'm always watching for these. Occasionally we get something comes in a heavy-duty box, and when you cut across the grain of the cardboard, you can see the 2 layers of cardboard there, and that's what we need. So I've got a supply of these. This one I just did a project out in my woodworking shop, and I put heat in there, and the water heater that is supplying the heat to the floor came in this box. It's a nice box, so scavenged that. So I now have that piece of cardboard. The beauty of using this is that the featherweight is then resting on the cardboard rather than on those rubber bed cushion feet. And if you look at some of the original featherweights, the bed cushions are all compressed from sitting, the weight of the machine sitting on them forever. And so when it's sitting on this cardboard, it's fully supported, but the bed cushions are slightly off the bottom of the case. So it really saves the bed cushion. So this is a great thing to do. I'm going to put that into the bottom of the case. You can see how it looks in there. And that's perfect. So we'll put our tray back here. And this one is complete. So I'm going to, again, this was an easy one to do. There was very little damage on this one. I didn't have to replace any hardware. I have some other cases that when I get to this winter, I'm going to show you how to replace or repair. I have one that I'm going to repair and one that I'm going to replace a piece of hardware, and that's a little bit trickier and not for the timid, because it involves some tricky steps. But it's doable. And I've also got some of the cases where there's significantly more wear, and so I will show you how I bring those back to life as well. But this one, I want to start with an easy one, so you could feel like this is something you could tackle yourself with your featherweight, and you can get results like this yourself. So Look forward to showing you more. Thank you.